Hey everybody, this is Perch, and this is a very simple video about one simple concept. What is relatable? And when you say we need to make our characters relatable, who are you making them relatable to? Because there is no such thing as making something relatable to everyone. We are a wide, diverse planet with all kinds of different life experiences, and if the last several years have taught us nothing, it's that we're not all the same. We do think differently. So what I'm kind of getting at is two quotes. So Joe Quesada, when he was explaining One More Day, this was when they retconned away the Peter Parker Mary Jane marriage. And by the way, Joe Quesada has been pretty adamant that he didn't do that. They didn't retcon anything. In fact, his quote, "It's very easy to unmarry a character or fix something like that. You just do a huge universal retcon and say a few events in history didn't happen. But that's not really the way we do it here at Marvel," Joe Quesada said. Keep in mind, Joe Quesada also said things like, if we ever do a crossover, the Ultimate Universe to the regular universe, it means we'll run out of ideas. So just throwing that out there. But why that statement worded that way is important is because it's kind of allowed, in some cases, Marvel and Quesada to say, we didn't retcon it. What we did was, we did a storyline where Peter and Mary Jane talked to Mephisto, and Mephisto offered them a deal, and they took it, and Mephisto disappeared the marriage. That's what was done. And that's where, potato, honestly. Yes, I understand there was a storyline, but the end result is the same. It was some events happened, and the marriage disappeared. But why the marriage disappeared was that Joe Quesada said, Peter Parker is a traditional youthful character, and that portrayal runs counter to him being married. His marriage ages him, and it's not relatable. Joe Quesada is now gone from Marvel, but C.B. Cebulski basically said something similar. He said, the thing with Peter Parker is he always has to be relatable. And why he's saying that is basically saying, he's asked, can you get rid of can you get rid of this retcon? Can you bring back the marriage or at least create this relationship? And C.B. Cebulski, basically says Peter Parker is better off unmarried, as is. Now, this is the crux of this video. It's that word relatable. What do we mean by relatable? Well, relatable means that a group of people have to say, I see myself in that character. I understand it. That's me. And so it becomes relatable. The funny part is, relatable means the audience that's buying and reading the comics identifies with what's in the comics. And here comes the big catch. The current buying audience of comics most likely would find a marriage more relatable than youthful, never going anywhere, trapped in suspended animation Peter Parker. But if you look at Marvel's comics, they're clearly playing to an audience. They're not just making random stuff up. I mean, whether it's that scene in AXE where you've got somebody tweeting and kind of going on and on about that. Whether it's kind of some of the jokey humor, some of the throwing pronouns into character introductions, all those kinds of things. The comic company is not doing that just for laughs or for no reason whatsoever. They actually believe they're being relatable. But to who? If you look at the comic buying audience has skewed older and older over the past 2 decades. Younger readers are not coming into comics at the same rate that they're leaving comics. Meaning, if you go back to the 80s and 90s, you had a good influx of teenagers and people in their 20s starting to read comics. It's why the numbers grew the way they did. When you get into the 90s, you got certainly some people coming in. Certainly there was a boom in the first half, but toward the second half, attentions were wandering. They were going to other things. And the audience that stuck with it aged, because that's what people do. It's a one-way track to death. So as they aged, these people got into their late 20s and then their 30s. And today, your average comic buyer, the person who's coming into the shop day in, day out, from all indications. And for this, I'm basically saying if you go to retailer forums, they talk about the customers, you go into a comic shop, you look at who's the real core buying audience, it's older now. If you add in dollars, meaning who's spending more, it definitely skews older. We're in this place now where 35 to 45 is probably your more core audience, and maybe even a little older than that. So if you say that Peter Parker has to be youthful, happy-go-lucky, down on his luck, but certainly marriage ages him, and we need him to be relatable to our audience, well, your audience has aged. You're basically saying, hey, it needs to happen for who? Teenagers, people in their early 20s? Well, by and large, those aren't people buying your comics. Those people have gone toward manga, have gone toward games on their phone, other things completely. Now, you may go get those people, but you're not going to get them with something like, hey, let's make Peter Parker not married. There's no evidence. In fact, there's actually plenty of counter evidence that the work over the last 2 decades has basically not brought in any long-term younger readers. The older group, the collectors, continue to collect. The people who are stuck on it continue to collect. That number is also declining, and it's why you see the monthly sales declining. And by the way, there's no judgment here in the sense that I think it would be wonderful if comic books could be relatable to people in their teens and 20s. I think that would help boost the market back up. You'd see those numbers start to climb. You'd be back to a world where the average comic sold could be in the 100,000 range. But that's not what we have today. And the approach to get those readers doesn't seem to be working. We've had Peter Parker now unmarried for 20 years roughly, or at least when was this? It's been about that. I think not quite 20 years. Anyway, we've had it for a while. They're not coming back. We haven't seen them rush in. We haven't seen this group that was going to find him more relatable and run back to comics show up. Instead, we've seen the slow decline of these books. You can look at the Dan Slott video. You can look at other things I've done around Spider-Man and kind of the numbers and everything else that's happened there. It paints a pretty convincing picture, especially when you look at it in the 10, 15, 20-year time frame. The people who are buying these comics are older. So when Cebulski says he has to be relatable, I agree that's a true statement. But right now, it feels like they're writing the character to be relatable to one audience, themselves. The people who are writing the comics, people who are editing the comics, those are the people who Peter Parker seems written for. Those are the people who the X-Men seems written for. Look at the entire Krakoa, very convoluted plant, drugs, and all the stuff that's going on with that. Endless resurrection. It makes almost no sense for a younger entry audience. Somebody who's coming into comics for the first time, the X-Men is more impenetrable than it's ever been. Are they coming to the market? That's not what the numbers seem to suggest. That's not what people are saying. That's not who seems to be supporting the comic. We're not seeing this big boom of new comic readers come in. So yeah, it has to be relatable, but it has to be relatable to the people willing to spend money on it, or a group of people you can successfully market to and get. The one group it shouldn't be relatable to is the creator themselves. Now, for art that's not for commercial art, not for sale, not comics that are going out, for those groups, for people who are doing some act of vanity, and that's not a negative thing, but if you're painting a picture, if you're doing something as fine art, you're creating a piece of work for you, and hopefully the rest of the world can enjoy it as well, but that's not what comics are. Comics are mass market products. They need to be relatable to the market that will pay for it. And so I find this whole quote either absurdly arrogant or just very misinformed. Look, it's a true statement. It doesn't fit the current situation. Yes, the thing with Peter Parker is he always has to be relatable. And you know what would make him relatable to the biggest core audience that's spending money on this thing? Making him married again. You know what make the X-Men relatable? Taking them back to their outlaw state that they were in, down in the X-Men 190 to 250 run. That would make them more relatable. What you have right now is relatable to a group of very insiders, people who work for the company directly or are hardcore attached to cosplay. And frankly, that's not enough people to make a successful comic. That group, you see the numbers in the indies. That's 5,000, maybe 10,000 copies a month. You cannot survive as a business with that number. So to Cebulski, it has to be relatable. Yes, you're correct. It has to be relatable to the people buying your book, not yourself. Thanks for listening.